Chapter 5 of the Case of Jennie Brice. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Case of Jennie Brice by Mary Roberts Reinhardt. Chapter 5. Mr. Reynolds did not come home to dinner after all. The water had got into the basement at the store he telephoned, one of the floodgates in the sewer having leaked, and they were moving some of the departments to an upper floor. I had expected to have him in the house that evening, and now was left alone again. But as it happened, I was not alone. Mr. Graves, one of the city detectives, came at 6:30 and went carefully over the Ladleys' room. I showed him the towel and the slipper and the broken knife, and where we had found the knife blade. He was very non-committal and left in a half hour, taking the articles with him in a newspaper. At 7 the doorbell rang. I went down as far as I could on the staircase, and I saw a boat outside the door, with the boatman and a woman in it. I called to them to bring the boat back along the hall, and I had a queer feeling that it might be Mrs. Ladley, and that I'd been making a fool of myself all day for nothing. But it was not Mrs. Ladley. "Is this number 42?" asked the woman as the boat came back. "Yes." "Does Mr. Ladley live here?" "Yes, but he is not here now." "Are you Mrs. Pittock?" "Pittman, yes." The boat bumped against the stairs, and the woman got out. She was as tall as Mrs. Ladley, and when I saw her in the light from the upper hall, I knew her instantly. It was Temple Hope, the leading woman from the Liberty Theater. "I would like to talk to you, Mrs. Pitman," she said. "Where can we go?" I led the way back to my room, and when she had followed me in, she turned and shut the door. "Now then," she said without any preliminary, "where is Jennie Brice?" "I don't know, Miss Hope," I answered. We looked at each other for a minute, and each of us saw what the other suspected. "He has killed her!" she exclaimed. "She was afraid he would do it. And he has." "Killed her and thrown her into the river," I said. "That's what I think, and he'll go free at that. It seems there isn't any murder when there isn't any corpse." "Nonsense. If he has done that, the river will give her up, eventually." "The river doesn't always give them up," I retorted. "Not in flood time, anyhow. Or when they are found it is months later, and you can't prove anything." She had only a little time, being due at the theater soon, but she sat down and told me the story she told afterward on the stand. She had known Jennie Brice for years, they having been together in the chorus as long before as Nadji. "She was married then to a fellow on the vaudeville circuit," Miss Hope said. "He left her about that time, and she took up with Ladley. I don't think they were ever married." "What?" I said, jumping to my feet. "And they came to a respectable house like this? There's never been a breath of scandal about this house, Miss Hope, and if this comes out, I'm ruined." "Well, perhaps they were married," she said. "Anyhow, they were always quarreling, and when he wasn't playing, it was worse. She used to come to my hotel and cry her eyes out." "I knew you were friends," I said. Almost the last thing she said to me was about the black and white dress of hers you were to borrow for the piece this week. "Black and white dress? I borrow one of Jennie Brice's dresses?" exclaimed Miss Hope. "I should think not. I have plenty of my own." That puzzled me, for she had said it, that was sure. And then I remembered that I had not seen the dress in the room that day, and I went in to look for it. It was gone. I came back and told Miss Hope. "A black and white dress? Did it have a red color?" she asked. "Yes." "Then I remember it. She wore a small black hat with a red quill with that dress. You might look for the hat." She followed me back to the room and stood in the doorway while I searched. The hat was gone, too. "Perhaps, after all, he is telling the truth," she said thoughtfully. Her fur coat isn't in the closet, is it?" It was gone. It is strange that, all day, I had never thought of looking over her clothes and seeing what was missing. I hadn't known all she had, of course, but I had seen her all winter in her fur coat and admired it. It was a striped fur, brown and gray, and very unusual, but with the coat missing and a dress and a hat gone, it began to look as if I had been making a fool of myself and stirring up a tempest in a teacup. Miss Hope was as puzzled as I was. "Anyhow, if he didn't kill her," she said, "it isn't because he did not want to. Only last week she had hysterics in my dressing room and said he had threatened to poison her. It was all Mr. Bronson, the business manager, and I could do to quiet her." She looked at her watch and exclaimed that she was late and would have to hurry. I saw her down to her boat. The river had been falling rapidly for the last hour or two, and I heard the boat scrape as it went over the doorsill. I did not know whether to be glad that the water was going down and I could live like a Christian again, or to be sorry for fear what we might find in the mud that was always left. Peter was lying where I had put him, on a folded blanket laid in a clothes basket. I went back to him and sat down beside the basket. "Peter," I said, "poor old Peter, who did this to you? Who hurt you?" He looked at me and whined, as if he wanted to tell me, if only he could. "Was it Mr. Ladley?" I asked, and the poor thing cowered close to his bed and shivered. I wondered if it had been he, and, if it had, why he had come back. Perhaps he had remembered the towel. Perhaps he would come again and spend the night there. I was like Peter. I cowered and shivered at the very thought. At 9 o'clock I heard a boat at the door. It had stuck there, and its occupant was scolding furiously at the boatman. Soon after, I heard splashing, and I knew that whoever it was wading back to the stairs through the 1.5 feet or so of water still in the hall. I ran back to my room and locked myself in, and then stood, armed with the stove lid lifter, in case it should be Ladley and he should break the door in. The steps came up the stairs, and Peter barked furiously. It seemed to me that this was to be my end, killed like a rat in a trap and thrown out the window, to float like my kitchen chair into Molly Maguire's kitchen, or to be found lying in the ooze of the yard after the river had gone down. The steps hesitated at the top of the stairs and turned back along the hall. Peter redoubled his noise. He never barked for Mr. Reynolds or the Ladleys. I stood still, hardly able to breathe. The door was thin and the lock loose. One good blow and the doorknob turned and I screamed. I recall that the light turned black, and that is all I do remember, until I came to, a half hour later, and saw Mr. Holcombe stooping over me. The door, with the lock broken, was standing open. I tried to move, and then I saw that my feet were propped on the edge of Peter's basket. "Better leave them up," Mr. Holcombe said. "It sends the blood back to the head. Half the damnful people in the world stick a pillow under a fainting woman's shoulders. How are you now?" "All right," I said feebly. "I thought you were Mr. Ladley." He helped me up, and I sat in a chair and tried to keep my lips from shaking. And then I saw that Mr. Holcombe had brought a suitcase with him and had set it inside the door. "Ladley is safe until he gets bail anyhow," he said. "They picked him up as he was boarding a Pennsylvania train bound east." "For murder?" I asked. "As a suspicious character," he replied grimly. "That does as well as anything for a time." He sat down opposite me and looked at me intently. "Mrs. Pitman," he said, "did you ever hear the story of the horse that wandered out of a village and could not be found?" I shook my head. "Well, the best wit of the village failed to locate the horse, but one day the village idiot walked into town, leading the missing animal by the bridle. When they asked him how he had done it, he said, 'Well, I just thought what I'd do if I was a horse,
and then I went and did it.